The neon glow of Tokyo pulses against the winter night sky on New Year's Eve, 1999. Fireworks bloom in brilliant bursts over the city skyline, their reflections dancing across the sleek glass facade of the convention center. Inside the forum's grand atrium, the science conference that has nominally drawn the world's brightest minds to Japan is losing the battle against its own open bar. Tony Stark moves through the crowd like a man who owns every room he enters. He is on his third drink since the speech, or possibly his fourth, when he's with his scientist partner Rumiko Fujikawa. Tonight, she has been talking to anyone who will listen about her new project. In the elevator, with the noise of the atrium receding behind the closing doors, she tells him about it properly. The project is called Firepower. She has been developing it under government sponsorship. A powered armored suit, purpose-built not for the battlefield in any traditional sense, but for something that Tony recognizes immediately as a more politically sensitive application. The suit is designed to field a new generation of armored soldiers, and beyond that, to provide a mechanism for controlling rogue superhumans. Tony turns that over twice in his head. He is sober enough to understand it and drunk enough to sit with it without immediately giving an opinion about it. He tells her it is impressive. He means it, which is the part that bothers him. There is something in what she describes that pushes past the constraints he would have assumed from a government contract. Something that suggests Rumiko has gone further than she was asked to go, because going further is simply what she does. He tells her, with more honesty than he has intended, and probably more than the alcohol can fully account for, that it intimidates him a little. Rumiko receives this the way she receives most things, which is without a particular ceremony. Tony is thinking about his drink, which he has finished, and about whether the elevator is moving as slowly as it seems, or whether that is him. He makes a noise that indicates engagement. He asks a follow-up question that is technically responsive, but lands about 2 topics behind where she currently is. Rumiko looks at him. The elevator opens back into the atrium, and the party swallows them both. Tony drifts naturally toward a cluster of people near the bar. Rumiko is still nearby, close enough to hear. Someone asks Tony about firepower or something adjacent to it. He picks up the thread of firepower and runs with it, and what comes out is not analysis. It is a comedy. He describes the project with the affectionate condescension of someone who finds an idea charming precisely because it is so far beneath serious consideration. A government-funded armored suit to police superhumans, as though the problem of extraordinary people is best solved by a committee with a budget and a contractor. He does a brief and not entirely inaccurate impression of a defense procurement meeting. The women he has been gravitating toward laugh, and Tony, responsive as always to an audience, goes a little further. Rumiko stands at the edge of it for a moment. She turns and walks away through the crowd, and the party closes behind her, and Tony does not notice. Rumiko leaves the demonstration humiliated. What was meant to showcase her as a major force in military technology is reduced to a joke, and years of work are overshadowed by Tony's ridicule. As the event ends, Rumiko goes to the roof to be alone. The city stretches out below her, and for a moment she is removed from the noise and attention. There, she begins to see the value of her anonymity. While Tony Stark lives in the spotlight, Rumiko realizes she can work without being noticed. No one is watching her. No one is expecting anything from her. What begins as humiliation turns into resolve. Instead of competing with Tony openly, Rumiko decides to build her own power in secret. Years later, in the present day, we are now in a montage sequence where it starts with a thief who is Abner Jenkins, operating as the Beetle, escapes Stark Tower before Iron Man can intercept him. Jarvis alerts Tony Stark to the theft, explaining that the stolen energy sample is too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. Iron Man immediately launches after Beetle as the chase races out of New York and across the United States. The pursuit becomes a high-speed aerial battle through changing landscapes. Beetle uses his suit's incredible agility to weave through mountain ranges, industrial cities, thunderstorms, and canyons, constantly forcing Iron Man to adapt. Tony realizes Beetle isn't simply running away. He's leading him somewhere. The chase finally reaches Seattle, where Beetle circles the Space Needle at full speed. The landmark becomes a giant aerial playground as the two armored opponents race around its observation deck, support legs, and surrounding skyline. Beetle's speed gives him the advantage, but Tony studies his flight pattern instead of trying to match it. Iron Man begins using the environment against him, forcing Beetle into increasingly tighter flight paths until the Beetle's suit can no longer compensate. A precisely timed electromagnetic pulse disrupts the armor's wing stabilizers, sending Beetle crashing onto the observation deck. Then, a series of unexplained blizzards strike across Chicago, bringing entire cities to a standstill. Roads freeze solid, power grids collapse, and emergency services are overwhelmed as temperatures plunge within minutes. At the center of the storms is Donald Gill, now operating as Blizzard. Equipped with a heavily armored cryogenic suit capable of generating freezing winds, ice projectiles, and sub-zero temperatures, Blizzard attacks a Stark Industries climate research facility to steal experimental weather control technology. By the time Iron Man arrives, the facility has become a frozen fortress. The battle spreads across the city as Blizzard covers skyscrapers, bridges, and highways in thick layers of ice. Iron Man struggles as his armor begins freezing over, reducing mobility and limiting his weapons. Realizing he cannot overpower Blizzard's freezing abilities, Tony instead targets the suit's cooling systems. Using nearby power stations and the city's electrical grid, Iron Man overloads Blizzard's cryogenic armor, forcing it to work beyond its limits. As the suit becomes increasingly unstable, Tony traps Blizzard inside his own expanding ice field before delivering a focused repulsor blast that shuts the armor down completely. Not long afterward, a string of impossible thefts targets government laboratories and technology companies across the country. Vaults are emptied without being opened, security systems record no intruders, and witnesses describe a mysterious figure walking through walls. The culprit soon becomes known as Ghost. Wearing an advanced phase-shifting suit, Leanne Foreman, once was Whiplash, is able to become intangible at will, allowing her to pass through solid objects, avoid Iron Man's attacks, and infiltrate even the most secure facilities. Her latest target is a Stark Industries quantum research laboratory, where she attempts to steal experimental molecular technology. Iron Man intercepts Ghost inside the facility, but quickly discovers that conventional weapons are useless against her. Every repulsor blast passes harmlessly as Ghost phases through walls, floors, and machinery, turning the laboratory into an unpredictable battlefield. Instead of trying to overpower her, Tony uses the laboratory's experimental equipment to track the energy fluctuations generated by Ghost's suit whenever she shifts between solid and intangible states. By overloading the facility's electromagnetic systems, he forces the suit to become unstable, limiting Ghost's ability to phase. Later, high above the city, Iron Man cruises silently through the clouds. Inside the helmet, Tony reviews recovered schematics from Beetle's flight systems, Blizzard's cryogenic armor, and Ghost's phase technology. His HUD suddenly interrupts the analysis. An encrypted S.H.I.E.L.D. transmission appears. Maria Hill informs Tony that S.H.I.E.L.D. has completed its preliminary investigation. Every recovered suit shares hidden design signatures buried beneath the visible engineering. The technology points toward the same anonymous creator operating within the criminal underworld. She explains that S.H.I.E.L.D. believes whoever did this has been equipping criminals with highly advanced custom-built armor in exchange for unknown payment. Maria continues by explaining that Leanne Foreman had been transferred under maximum security following her imprisonment. During transport, the S.H.I.E.L.D. convoy suffered what was initially believed to be an accident. The investigation now suggests it was a carefully orchestrated extraction. Leanne disappeared before agents could secure the crash site, and shortly afterward she resurfaced under a new identity, Ghost, wearing a suit unlike anything S.H.I.E.L.D. had previously encountered. Technical analysis now confirms that her armor was built by the same mysterious engineer responsible for Beetle's and Blizzard's equipment. Following the montage of Iron Man's battles, the film shifts to Tony Stark's Malibu home, where the scale of his private workshop reflects the intensity of his obsession. The room is filled with holographic schematics, layered technical readouts, and evolving armor concepts as Tony and Jarvis analyze the next stage of his work. Since the Chitauri invasion of New York, Tony has been unable to escape the memory of the destruction, the vulnerability it exposed, and the realization that a single suit is no longer enough. That fear has become the driving force behind his latest designs, pushing him toward the creation of the Iron Legion, a network of armored systems meant to extend Iron Man beyond one man and one machine. Pepper Potts is present in the workshop and immediately notices how consumed Tony has become by his work. She tries to redirect him toward basic rest and self-care, but Tony is focused entirely on the future of the armor program. He explains that he has been thinking about the suits and that he believes he understands what Iron Man must become. From there, his concern shifts to the condition of Stark Industries, and he begins asking for a full accounting of what remains of the company, what facilities are still operational, what was lost, and how severe the damage has been. Pepper tells him that Stark Industries is no longer really his company in any meaningful sense. Tony learns that attacks carried out by enemies he had previously stopped devastated Stark facilities around the world, and that his research and designs were taken in the process. Pepper then explains the extent of the collapse. After Tony stepped down and made her CEO, she sold off as much as she could in an effort to salvage what remained. But the company now exists mostly as a corporate shell rather than a functioning empire. She describes the role as the worst job she ever had, and Tony responds by dismissing her competence in it. She counters by pointing out that he was an absentee boss, and, as the last remaining shareholder, she has the authority to remove him. Tony accepts that decision immediately, ending his formal control over the company. Pepper then agrees to take on a new role, this time as the person who will help run Tony's next venture, even though there is no salary attached, and the danger surrounding them remains very real. With that settled, Tony announces that he needs to travel to New York for a few days. His purpose is practical rather than personal. Reed Richards still leads the Fantastic Four, and Tony believes Reed is the person most likely to have the materials and technical resources necessary to help him build the suits he has in mind. While Tony handles that trip, Pepper is left with the task of figuring out how to rebuild what remains of the Stark Empire and determine what shape the company should take next. The film cuts to a corporate defense expo where military officials, government representatives, and defense contractors gather for a private demonstration hosted by Rumiko Fujikawa, the ambitious head of Fujinet. Standing before an audience that includes Senator Boynton and senior military personnel, Rumiko unveils the company's newest breakthrough in corporate security technology, firepower. A presentation video begins, showcasing the armored suit in combat against a team of heavily armed corporate saboteurs attempting to infiltrate a high-security Fujinet facility. The footage highlights firepower's immense strength, advanced weapon systems, and ability to neutralize multiple threats while protecting valuable corporate assets. Rumiko presents the demonstration as proof that private industry can develop security technology equal to, or better than, traditional military hardware. Despite the impressive display, Senator Boynton remains unconvinced. Having dealt with the failures of Hammer Industries' defense contracts in the past, he sees little difference between firepower and the expensive machines that repeatedly failed to deliver on their promises. Rumiko responds by revealing that the armor is not operating autonomously, but is being piloted by her trusted assistant, Saya Ishii, demonstrating that the technology functions under direct human control rather than relying solely on artificial intelligence. Building on the successful demonstration, Rumiko introduces additional firepower variants designed for different operational environments. She explains that specialized models have been developed for extreme heat, Arctic conditions, underwater missions, and other hazardous combat zones, arguing that Fujinet can provide adaptable solutions for virtually any military scenario. Her presentation is clearly intended to convince the armed forces that Fujinet should become their next major defense contractor. The presentation begins to lose momentum when one of the attending military officers reminds the room that Tony Stark has returned as Iron Man. The comment immediately shifts the atmosphere. Even Rumiko is caught off guard by this, as the officer questions whether any defense program can truly compete with Stark's technology or reputation. Rumiko's sales pitch suddenly carries far less weight as comparisons to Iron Man dominate the discussion. Later, outside the building, Senator Boynton confronts Rumiko before both parties depart. He accuses her of trying to deceive him with another expensive weapons program and makes it clear that he has no intention of supporting Fuginet's proposal. In his view, matters of war belong in the hands of the military and innovators like Tony Stark, not corporate executives looking to profit from defense contracts. The meeting ends without an agreement. Boynton enters his limousine and leaves the venue while Rumiko returns to her own vehicle. The story shifts to New York City, where Tony Stark arrives at the Baxter Building seeking the help of Reed Richards. Deep within the Fantastic Four's laboratories, the two geniuses are already immersed in their work. Advanced fabrication systems, experimental materials, and holographic schematics surround them as they begin developing the first generation of the Iron Legion. The partnership quickly reveals why both men are regarded as some of the greatest scientific minds on Earth. Tony approaches problems with instinct, improvisation, and bold leaps of imagination, while Reed prefers careful calculations and exhaustive analysis. Their differing methods often lead to friendly competition as each attempts to improve upon the other's ideas. But beneath the rivalry is genuine respect. Both recognize that they are working toward the same goal. As prototype Legion drones take shape, the conversation turns toward upgrades and future applications. Tony explains that ever since the Chitauri invasion of New York, he has struggled with the feeling that he was unprepared for what came through that portal. The memory continues to haunt him. The invasion showed him how small one armored hero can be when faced with threats from beyond Earth. He believes the world is changing faster than anyone realizes, and that simply being Iron Man is no longer enough. For Tony, the Iron Legion represents a solution. If he cannot be everywhere at once, then perhaps Iron Man can. The drones are designed to respond to crises across the globe, acting as an extension of his reach and helping protect people before disasters spiral out of control. Reed understands the logic, though he quietly recognizes that the project is also fueled by Tony's lingering fear and need for control following New York. Meanwhile, far from New York, James Rhodes arrives at Ohio to spend time with his mother, Roberta Rhodes. Away from military obligations and superhero activity, the visit offers a rare opportunity for peace. Mother and son share stories, reflect on the years that have passed, and enjoy a brief period of normalcy together. For Rhodey, the visit serves as a reminder of what he is fighting to protect. That peace does not last. Soon afterward, Rhodey is deployed overseas as War Machine. Intelligence reports place a heavily armed terrorist organization operating within remote regions of China, prompting military intervention. Equipped with the War Machine armor, Rhodey launches into combat. The resulting battle is massive. War Machine tears through enemy positions with overwhelming firepower, engaging armored vehicles, fortified compounds, and anti-aircraft weaponry. Explosions illuminate the countryside as Rhodey systematically dismantles the terrorist network. Despite the intensity of the conflict, the mission is ultimately successful, and War Machine returns to the United States believing the operation is complete. Unknown to him, one surviving terrorist manages to escape. The survivor eventually makes contact with Xincheng, the mysterious figure known as the Mandarin, within the heavily fortified Mandarin city. There, the terrorist provides a detailed account of War Machine's actions and reports his connection to Tony Stark. The information immediately captures Yin's attention. Recognizing the value of the connection between Rhodey and Iron Man, the Mandarin orders his network to gather everything they can find. His operatives begin a sophisticated intelligence campaign, quietly infiltrating digital systems, financial records, communication networks, and hidden databases. Rather than launching direct attacks, They patiently assemble pieces of a larger puzzle. Over time, they discover methods of accessing Tony Stark's backup systems. They identify vulnerabilities within his retrieval procedures and begin compromising critical data. Their efforts eventually extend even further, reaching systems connected to S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. Piece by piece, the Mandarin gains access to information that should have been impossible to obtain. As the operation continues, Yin learns more and more about Tony Stark than anyone outside his closest circle should know. He studies Stark's history, relationships, technology, habits, and psychological profile. The deeper he looks, the more fascinated he becomes with the man behind Iron Man. During this investigation, one name repeatedly appears: Rumiko Fujikawa. The head of Fujinet has a history with Tony Stark dating back years. Their paths crossed long before either became involved in the events now unfolding. Realizing she may possess valuable insight into Tony's thinking, ambitions, and weaknesses, the Mandarin decides to establish contact with her. The story moves to Oklahoma City, where Pepper Potts has organized a high-level meeting with senior military generals and government officials. The atmosphere inside the conference room is tense as everyone waits to hear the future of Stark Industries. With Tony Stark absent, Pepper takes responsibility for delivering the difficult news. She explains that, for all practical purposes, Stark Industries is bankrupt. Years of attacks on its facilities, the theft of its technology, and the sale of its remaining assets have reduced the once dominant corporation to little more than its name. The announcement leaves the room unsettled. The military leaders had relied on Stark Industries for decades, and the revelation raises serious concerns about the future of defense contracts and technological development. Before anyone can fully process the news, a powerful sonic boom echoes outside the building. Moments later, Tony Stark arrives, walks into the conference room, and immediately takes control of the meeting. Rather than discussing the company's financial collapse, he focuses on its future. He announces that while he intends to rebuild the company from the ground up, one decision has already been made. Stark Industries will no longer develop weapons of war. The declaration sparks immediate opposition. Senator Boynton forcefully challenges Tony's decision, arguing that Stark Industries has been instrumental in protecting the United States for generations. He questions Tony's loyalty and demands to know whose interests he now serves if he refuses to continue supplying military technology. Tony's answer is simple. He is no longer choosing sides. He is acting according to his own principles. The meeting quickly falls apart. One by one, the generals abandon the discussion, recognizing that no agreement will be reached. As the room empties, Boynton leaves Tony with one final warning. He reminds him that he is no longer the billionaire industrialist he once was. Without military funding, rebuilding his company will be nearly impossible, and if Tony truly wants financial support, he should reconsider his decision before it is too late. Sometime later, Tony holds a public presentation to unveil the next chapter of his career. Standing before a packed audience of journalists, investors, scientists, and business leaders, Tony formally introduces the name of his new company, Stark Resilient. Rather than presenting a new weapons platform or armored suit, Tony delivers a speech about innovation and responsibility. He reflects on the repulsor technology that first changed his life, explaining how the arc reactor implanted in his chest became something many people admired and envied. What began as a device to keep him alive ultimately became proof that clean, limitless energy was possible. Tony announces that he no longer intends to keep that technology to himself. He offers the world access to repulsor-based energy as the foundation for a new global infrastructure capable of ending dependence on fossil fuels within the next 30 years. He challenges governments and energy corporations to embrace the technology and transform the world's energy systems for future generations. The speech concludes with a bold promise. If existing industries refuse to adapt and continue relying on outdated energy sources, Stark Resilient will build the future without them and put every obsolete competitor out of business. Tony Stark reaches out to Carson, Wyche, one of his former employees. 12 years earlier, Tony dismissed Carson after he proposed a new type of personal digital assistant that Tony believed lacked commercial potential. Since then, Carson has built a successful company specializing in electric vehicles. Tony then proposes a partnership. Rather than competing in the automotive industry, Tony wants Carson's expertise to help integrate repulsor energy into the next generation of electric cars. Together, they hope to create vehicles powered by clean, sustainable energy, turning Tony's vision for Stark Resilient into a practical reality. Soon afterward, Tony visits the newly established Resilient headquarters to meet the team that will help bring the company to life. Carson introduces him to Walter Macken, a brilliant systems engineer responsible for overseeing Resilient's infrastructure and network architecture. Tony quickly recognizes Macken's ability to organize impossibly complex systems into practical solutions. Next is Tim Cababa, an exceptionally gifted software engineer whose expertise lies in artificial intelligence, distributed computing, and emerging digital technologies. Tony is immediately impressed by Tim's unconventional thinking and eagerness to tackle problems that most programmers would consider impossible. Tony is then introduced to Bethany Cabe, Resilient's head of security. Experienced, disciplined, and highly capable, Bethany has been tasked with protecting both the company's personnel and its revolutionary technology. Tony appreciates having someone willing to challenge his decisions when necessary. Finally, Carson introduces Bambi Arbogast, the company's operations manager, responsible for coordinating Resilient's day-to-day activities, budgets, logistics, and administration. Bambi ensures the rapidly growing company functions smoothly while allowing Tony and the engineers to focus entirely on innovation. Elsewhere, one of the most secure prisons in the world comes under attack. The vault is assaulted by forces loyal to the Mandarin. The attack is swift and devastating, overwhelming the facility's defenses as explosions tear through its reinforced structure. Amid the chaos, Rumiko Fujikawa, wearing the firepower armor, infiltrates the prison alongside the Mandarin's operatives. Inside the vault, prisoners begin escaping as security collapses around them. Justin Hammer emerges from his cell, still suffering recurring pain in his head following his last confrontation with Iron Man. Around him, inmates flood through the damaged corridors. However, Hammer, Leon Foreman, Donald Gill, and Abner Jenkins fail to escape. After battling the remaining vault security personnel, they instead find themselves surrounded and held at gunpoint by the Mandarin's guards. Moments later, the Mandarin enters the vault, and he formally introduces himself to the captives before addressing Hammer directly. Yin explains that he has specifically come for him and expects all four of them to accompany him. As the group exits the now-destroyed prison complex, Hammer questions why he has been chosen. Yin reveals that he knows everything about Hammer's past, his technological expertise, and his potential value, making it clear that he has much larger plans. Before they can leave the scene, Iron Man arrives and launches into battle against the Mandarin in firepower, attempting to stop the escape. Despite his experience, he quickly discovers that he is completely outmatched. The combined strength of the Mandarin's mystical power and firepower's overwhelming firepower proves too much, and Iron Man is decisively defeated. Watching Tony fall, Hammer, Leanne, Donald, and Jenkins take satisfaction in seeing the man responsible for their defeats finally brought down. Following the battle, Iron Man arrives to stop the Mandarin's assault before finding himself confronted by the firepower armor. As the armored figure steps forward, the helmet opens to reveal Rumiko. Tony is stunned to discover that the woman whose project he dismissed years earlier is now standing before him as one of the Mandarin's closest allies. Rumiko reminds Tony that years ago, while he was drunk, he mocked her firepower project and refused to take her ambitions seriously. She tells him that moment became the turning point in her life. Rather than giving up, she founded her own company, Fujikawa, transforming it into a powerful technological empire operating across the globe. Now, she proudly stands beside the Mandarin, no longer seeking Tony Stark's approval. Yin then introduces himself to Tony, revealing that he knows everything about him. Badly injured during the battle, Tony swears that he is sorry for what happened all those years ago. He admits that he never meant what he said during that drunken encounter and regrets humiliating Rumiko when she was only trying to prove herself. Rumiko refuses to accept the apology. She declares that it is far too late for regrets. Driven by years of resentment and convinced Tony deserves everything that is happening to him, she unleashes the full power of the firepower armor against Iron Man as the Mandarin takes Tony prisoner. Yin declares that Tony now belongs to him and that his genius will be used to serve the Mandarin's ambitions. Hammer, Leanne, Donald, and Jenkins are also taken into custody. Unlike Tony, they openly refuse to accompany Yin or submit to his authority. Their resistance is short-lived. The Mandarin quickly establishes that he alone is in command, forcing them to understand that they will follow his orders whether they choose to or not. The screen fades to black. Six months later, the story shifts to Seattle, Washington, where Resilient holds its annual keynote presentation. With Tony Stark still absent, Carson Wyche serves as the public face of the company and presents an update on its progress over the past half year. He frames Resilient as thriving in Tony's absence and uses the occasion to reinforce the company's momentum. He revisits the idea that Tony's influence continues to shape the company's direction, describing Resilient as a force that is actively pursuing new opportunities rather than waiting for them. He emphasizes that the company's reach has expanded far beyond automobiles and now extends into the broader digital lifestyle, with a focus on revolutionizing power and delivering future technologies more quickly. Carson also outlines Resilient's plans to move into urban renewal, commuter transport, and data infrastructure. He contrasts the familiar idea of the cloud with Resilient's next major innovation, the Swarm, a system of atomic-scale picoprocessors designed to function as a personal, wireless external memory network, powered by the shared repulsor infranet connecting Resilient devices around the world. The Swarm is presented as a breakthrough in miniature computing and connected living. The keynote concludes with strong enthusiasm from the audience, signaling the beginning of a new era for Resilient during Tony Stark's absence. Meanwhile, Pepper Potts continues searching desperately for any sign of Tony Stark. With 6 months having passed since his disappearance, she returns to Tony's workshop laboratory, hoping that Jarvis has uncovered new information. She questions the artificial intelligence about Tony's whereabouts, but every search, satellite scan, and communication sweep has produced nothing. Tony has simply vanished without a trace. Unable to accept the silence, Pepper contacts James Rhodes. Rhodey explains that he has been using every military resource available to look for Tony, but there has been no success. He reminds Pepper that Resilience engineers are continuing to develop the Swarm and believes it offers the best chance of eventually locating Tony. As difficult as it is, he urges her to let the company continue its work. Pepper understands that the Swarm may be their greatest hope, but after 6 long months without any word from Tony, the uncertainty has become increasingly difficult to endure. Elsewhere in Pakistan, Operation Firepower is deployed throughout the streets as part of another overseas mission. Led by Rumiko and supported by Saya operating the firepower armor, the operation systematically secures key locations while the nation's dictator loses control of the capital. Rather than protecting the regime, Rumiko orders Operation Firepower to withdraw, abandoning the dictator to the increasingly angry crowds gathering throughout the city. As the operation concludes, Rumiko receives a call from Senator Boynton at the Pentagon. He informs her that the government security contract with Fujinet has been terminated. Rumiko argues that Fujinet and Operation Firepower have become the force holding together the world's most unstable regions and insists that canceling the partnership will only create greater chaos. Boynton, however, has come to recognize the extent of Rumiko's manipulation and concludes that he has been working alongside a criminal rather than a legitimate defense contractor. The call ends. Alone in his office at the Pentagon, Boynton sits in silence, realizing the consequences of the decisions he has made and the role he has played in empowering Fujinet. He turns his attention to the handgun resting on his desk. Overcome by despair, he takes his own life. The story returns to Mandarin City, located outside Mongolia, China, where Tony Stark is brought before Xincheng in the Mandarin's private office. The discussion focuses on the construction of the Titanomechs and the shortage of materials needed to complete them. Tony explains that the project cannot move forward without the proper raw materials and that Hammer failed for the same reason. He makes it clear that the Titanomechs can be built only if the missing supplies are obtained. Yin rejects Tony's explanation, insisting that this was not the agreement. Tony reminds him that the arrangement was for access to everything needed to build the Titanomechs within the Mandarin's budget and schedule. Yin responds by ordering Tony removed from his presence after using one of his rings to attack him. Tony makes one last effort to convince him that the materials list should simply be stolen, since no money would be required and the project could proceed if the necessary items were secured. Yin ultimately decides the work cannot continue without the required resources and has Tony taken away. Back in the laboratory, Justin Hammer continues assisting with the Titanomech project, but his condition has worsened significantly. He struggles to speak clearly and appears to be suffering from severe brain damage. Tony urges him to stop working and get some rest, then suggests using the delay before the Titanomech materials arrive to try to repair Hammer's damaged mind. Somewhere within Mandarin City, Yin assembles Blizzard, Ghost, and the Beetle before sending them on a critical mission. With Tony Stark's list of required Titanomech materials now in his possession, Yin explains that each of them has a clear purpose to serve. He reminds them that considerable effort was made to secure their freedom and that they are valuable investments in his plans for the future. Their task is to gather every material Stark requires, regardless of where it is located or who stands in their way. Yin declares that they are building something that will shape tomorrow and that nothing must prevent them from achieving that vision. The villains depart, and a montage follows as they travel across the world, stealing the rare components needed for the Titanomechs. Their first operation takes them to Taipei, where they infiltrate a high-security technology facility and seize advanced electronic materials. They next strike the port of Oakland, hijacking specialized industrial shipments before disappearing ahead of local authorities. Their mission then carries them to Muir Island, where they steal rare mineral resources essential for the Titanomech construction. Throughout the montage, the three villains gradually develop a working relationship. Their personalities frequently clash as they argue over strategy, question each other's decisions, and compete to prove themselves, yet they slowly learn how to combine their unique abilities into an effective team. Despite the constant banter and rivalry, each successful mission brings them closer to completing the Mandarin's objective. Their final stop is Vancouver, where they move to acquire another shipment of Titanomech materials. Before the operation can be completed, War Machine intercepts them. Rhodey confronts the group, reminding them that each of them had previously been defeated and imprisoned by Iron Man and demanding to know why they are free again. Ghost explains that their escape was made possible during the attack on the vault. Rhodey then presses them for information about Tony Stark's whereabouts, convinced they know more than they are willing to admit. The villains refuse to reveal anything. A tense exchange quickly gives way to an intense battle as War Machine takes on all three opponents at once. Blizzard uses his cryogenic weaponry to limit Rhodey's mobility. Ghost phases through his attacks to keep him off balance, and the Beetle uses his speed and aerial maneuverability to strike from every direction. Working together, they overwhelm War Machine through coordinated attacks, forcing him into a defensive fight. Although Rhodey refuses to back down, the combined assault eventually proves too much. The villains manage to disable War Machine long enough to complete their theft, allowing the villains to escape with the Titanomech materials before military reinforcements can arrive. Back in Mandarin City, deep within the Mandarin's hospital room, Justin Hammer undergoes another operation as Tony Stark continues modifying the enhancements that have been implanted into him. The procedure is far more complicated than Hammer expected, and the strain is beginning to take its toll. Hammer grows increasingly worried and complains that the pain is becoming unbearable, while Tony insists that he will be fine and that only a few more changes remain. As the operation continues, Tony suddenly notices that several of the procedures have become confused with one another. Realizing something has gone wrong, he immediately tries to halt the operation and calls up toward the observation booth, where the Mandarin has been overseeing everything. Yin responds by signaling his guards, who immediately enter the room with their weapons trained on Tony. Tony explains that he is not a surgeon and cannot complete the procedure himself. After a brief pause, Yin signals once again, and the guards lower their weapons. He dismisses the others, leaving himself and Tony alone for a private conversation. Tony is relieved, and Yin responds with a calm, ominous confidence, speaking of his mysterious influence and asking how the smartest man in the world intends to spend the rest of his morning. Tony claims that he may simply kill himself, which would end Yin's plans once and for all, but Yin dismisses the idea, certain that Tony will not take his own life. He points out that Tony still believes he can win. Tony challenges Yin's confidence, but Yin reveals the truth behind his rise to power. He explains that he discovered a gift from the stars and gradually learned to master each of the 10 rings individually by testing them on trees and rocks. Only after mastering them one by one did he begin to understand their true purpose. He reveals that the rings are not rings at all, but vessels containing the essence of long-dead warriors of cosmic legend, trapped in a phantasmal state much like data stored on a hard drive. Yin believes he was meant to serve as their vessel in the flesh and to orchestrate the events necessary for their resurrection. He says the beings are in his mind, pushing and pulling him, waiting for the moment when they can finally be free. He makes clear that Tony and Hammer have helped bring that reunion closer to reality, and that the vessels need new homes. Yin ends the conversation and has Tony escorted back to the laboratory. Meanwhile, Justin Hammer has recovered enough to return to work and reunites with Tony Stark inside the Mandarin's laboratory. Tony informs Hammer that Yin's Titanomech project is almost complete and tells him that, by morning, the two of them will be going to war together. After months of work, Tony has completed 3 Titanomechs. Confident in the results, the Mandarin prepares for the next stage of his plan by removing 3 of the 10 rings, the Spin Ring, the Remaker Ring, and the Lightning Ring, and placing each one inside a Titanomech. Tony questions whether the Mandarin wants to test the machines first, but Yin dismisses the idea. He explains that he only needed to verify Justin Hammer's earlier work because it had failed. If Tony says the Titanomechs are ready, then he believes they are ready. Tony confirms that the machines are complete. Yin explains that he has never willingly separated himself from the rings since discovering them around 1,000 years ago, noting that even the skin beneath them has changed over the years. He tells Tony that he will watch the activation from the observation deck, while Tony begins preparing the remaining 7 Titanomechs. Tony reminds Yin that he still has not received everything he requested to finish the project. He argues that he has delivered everything the Mandarin demanded and expects Yin to fulfill his side of the agreement by acquiring the remaining materials more quickly. Yin insists that Tony will receive everything in due time and warns him not to question his authority. He then informs Tony that all of Mandarin City is now at his disposal, explaining that the entire city was built in preparation for this day. Meanwhile, at the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport in Seattle, Washington, the Resilient team gathers inside one of the airport's hangar bays to prepare for the public launch of the swarm. Carson Wyche is joined by Walter Macken, Tim Cababa, Bethany Cabe, and Bambi Arbogast as they make their final preparations. Carson reflects on how difficult it has been to lead the company without both Tony Stark and Pepper Potts present. Macken reminds him that although neither of them is there, the team has earned the right to carry Resilient forward and that the company was designed to continue operating even in their absence. Reassured by his colleagues, Carson leaves to begin the presentation. Standing before the assembled audience, Carson introduces the swarm as the most ambitious achievement in Resilient's history. He explains that the technology represents a revolutionary leap in atomic computing, allowing data to be stored at the scale of individual atoms. Powered by consumer-grade repulsor energy built into every Resilient product, The swarm operates through a worldwide wireless micropower network connected by a constellation of satellites launched in partnership with organizations in China, India, and the private sector. Carson concludes by reminding the audience that the resilient car was only the beginning. With the launch of the swarm, he declares that the future is now available to anyone, anywhere. As Resilient officially launches the swarm across the globe, millions of atomic-scale picoprocessors disperse into the atmosphere, linking together through the repulsor infranet exactly as Carson had promised. Around the world, the technology comes online, marking the beginning of a new era in computing. Deep within Mandarin City, Tony Stark watches the launch unfold from a monitor station inside the laboratory. Despite being held captive, he quietly observes Resilient achieving the vision they had built together months earlier. Nearby monitors also display the Mandarin communicating with a newly completed Titanomechs, confirming that Yin's plans are moving forward just as quickly. Elsewhere inside the compound, Justin Hammer discreetly triggers a failure in the mess hall security camera network. The disruption gives Tony a brief opportunity to address the Mandarin's hired villains without surveillance. Tony gathers everyone together and delivers a rapid, urgent appeal, reminding them that most of them hate Iron Man, that they came to work for the Mandarin because of that hatred, and that they have now discovered they are effectively walking bombs. He points out that most of them never understood what they were signing up for, and that they are all prisoners in one way or another. He warns them that the Mandarin's rings are far more dangerous than they appear, and that he may have already given Yin everything needed to unleash devastation on an enormous scale. Tony admits that they all have reasons to despise one another, but insists that their only chance is to work together if they want to survive the night in Mandarin City. He urges them to choose a side quickly before it is too late. The speech ends just as Hammer quietly informs Tony through the miniature speaker that the 68 seconds have expired. Moments later, the Mandarin's guards rush into the area after the surveillance system comes back online. Tony immediately defuses the situation, insisting nothing unusual has happened and casually asking if he can join everyone for lunch. The incident passes without raising further suspicion. Later, Lee and Foreman make her way to the laboratory after hearing Tony's appeal. Although she no longer has access to her ghost suit or its technology, she offers to help him oppose the Mandarin. Upon entering the lab, she is surprised to discover Justin Hammer working alongside Tony. Unlike the broken man she remembers, Hammer now appears mentally alert and capable once again. From behind a new suit he has been secretly constructing inside the laboratory, Tony welcomes Leanne to the team, quietly adding another ally to the resistance forming within Mandarin City. Tony continues preparing the resistance for what he knew would be the final confrontation. With the Titanomechs nearing completion and the Mandarin's plan almost ready to unfold, Tony gathers the villains who have quietly chosen to stand with him and makes it clear that they would have to live with the consequences of their choice. He emphasizes that there's no room for hesitation and that the stakes are nothing less than the survival of everyone on Earth. Donald Gill is uneasy about the possibility of killing the men who have not joined them, while Hammer explains that Yin intends to kill everyone anyway and that the bombs implanted in them left them with only a few possible outcomes: fight, die, or perhaps survive if enough of them succeeded. Tony reinforces that Yin will destroy everything if they fail. Abner Jenkins then raised the practical concern of whether they could truly get the drop on their enemy. The scene shifts to the Mandarin's private office, where Tony delivered another progress report on the Titanomech project. He explained that Titan 04 and 05 were ahead of schedule and that the remaining units would depend on the arrival of materials. Yin expresses surprise at the progress, and Tony attributes the speed to Hammer's renewed ability to work. Yin credits the remarkable output to the pressure of captivity and the conditions in the caves. Tony then steers the conversation toward one of the Mandarin's side projects, asking about the purpose of a large drill Hammer has been building and whether he could dismantle it for parts. Instead of answering directly, Yin turns the discussion toward the recent camera outage in the mess hall and implies that Tony used the moment to stir up a rebellion. He notes that the technical staff responsible for the glitch have already been punished and that several men inside the facility believed Tony had given a rousing speech while the cameras were down. Tony denies any involvement and claims not to remember doing or saying anything unusual in the mess hall. Yin dismisses the matter, telling him to focus on the Titanomechs, and makes it clear that the drill is off-limits. Tony accepts the decision, and the exchange ends with both men returning to their respective roles, each convinced he was one step closer to outmaneuvering the other. Far away at Stark Resilience headquarters in Aberdeen, Washington, Macken and Tim continue monitoring the worldwide swarm network from the company's operations center. Macken is in the middle of a word puzzle when Tim notices that one of the monitoring displays has turned red. Macken explains that the screen is showing swarm geoanalytics, where map data and usage statistics are combined to determine activity patterns. Tim is surprised to see swarm activity in China, and even more surprised when he realizes that a small rural town there appears to be using more swarm space than Los Angeles. Macken quickly understands what the data means. They have found Tony. Tim repeats the discovery, confirming that Stark has been located. Back in a laboratory at Mandarin City, Tony Stark and Justin Hammer continue working side by side. Hidden beneath the Mandarin's watch, the two engineers secretly begin constructing armored suits for themselves. Tony focuses on building the Silver Centurion armor, while Hammer assembles a new Titanium Man suit. As they work, Hammer reflects on how familiar the process feels and how much it resembles the kind of work he used to do. Tony responds by recalling his own history of building makeshift technology from scraps in desperate circumstances, though it has been some time since he last did so. He then realizes that Stark Resilient has not only launched the swarm, but has apparently used it to locate him. Hammer immediately understands the danger. If the army they're preparing to fight is growing larger, they need to stop it before it can move. He warns that any movement on the enemy's part could expose their position and lead them straight into a trap. Tony recognizes the threat and concludes that they have no choice but to accelerate their work and move faster. Meanwhile, Pepper and Rhodey arrive at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., determined to secure government authorization for a rescue mission into China. Armed with the swarm's discovery of Tony Stark's location, they believe time is running out and that immediate action is necessary. Inside the Pentagon, Pepper tries to impress upon the receptionist the urgency of the situation, emphasizing that this is an international incident and that Tony Stark may have been abducted and manipulated. The receptionist explains that the building is in the middle of a major transition following the senator's death, but Pepper remains frustrated by the delays and bureaucratic obstacles standing in the way of a rescue. Before the discussion can continue, Rumiko Fujikawa appears and takes control of the situation. She makes it clear that authorizing a reckless incursion into China is not a simple matter and invites Pepper and Rhodey into her office. Once inside, Rumiko explains her role at the Pentagon, noting that Fujinet has long handled much of the private sector security work there and that she is now serving as liaison to technological defense, while a permanent replacement is vetted. She then presses both of them on how they know Tony is in China, but Rhodey refuses to reveal proprietary information. Rumiko remains unconvinced and ultimately denies the request outright. She states that no resilient operatives, agents, or technology will be allowed anywhere near China for the foreseeable future and orders Pepper and Rhodey out of her office. Xincheng sits alone outside the central complex, meditating in silence as he prepares for the final stage of his plan. The peace is interrupted when his phone rings. It's Rumiko, calling from Washington, D.C., with urgent news. Yin's annoyed at being disturbed, but Rumiko informs him that Stark has somehow contacted them and that they now know he's being held. The revelation immediately throws Yin into a rage. Realizing that Tony has somehow reached the outside world despite every precaution, he unleashes the power of one of his rings against a nearby tree before struggling to regain control of himself. He forces himself to calm down and reasserts his authority, then orders Stark found and brought to him so he could discover what has been going on. The order spread throughout Mandarin City within moments. Guards flood every sector of the compound, locking down laboratories, barracks, workshops, and storage facilities. Search teams sweep through the city's different zones looking for Tony Stark, but instead of finding him, they discover that several prisoners have disappeared as well. Tony Stark, Justin Hammer, Leon Foreman, Donald Gill, and Abner Jenkins have already armed themselves. Now suited up, the group launches a coordinated assault against the Mandarin's forces. The sudden uprising catches the guards completely off guard as fighting erupted throughout the facility. One of the guards urgently reports over the communications network that there's a riot in the mess hall and that all points need to be locked down immediately. Inside the command center, Yin responds with a brutal order to eliminate the attackers. Another guard attempts to coordinate the compound's automated security systems, but the countermeasures have already failed. Realizing his defenses have been compromised, Yin decides to intervene personally. Across Mandarin City, Iron Man, Titanium Man, Ghost, Blizzard, and the Beetle continue battling through waves of the Mandarin's forces, clearing a path deeper into the complex. Knowing they have only one opportunity to dismantle the Mandarin's operation, Tony quickly divides the team. Ghost, Beetle, and Blizzard are sent to the armory with orders to destroy every piece of Stark and Hammer technology the Mandarin had built, stolen, or otherwise acquired. Hammer is assigned to the drill, with instructions to tear it apart, since whatever the Mandarin intends to do with it is reason enough to destroy it. Hammer asks what Tony plans to do next, and Tony answers that he'll go after the Mandarin himself. With their objective assigned, the Resistance split apart, each member racing toward their target as the battle for Mandarin City reaches its decisive final phase. Ghost, the Beetle, and Blizzard reach the Mandarin City's armory, the vast complex where years of stolen Stark Industries and Hammer Industries technology have been stockpiled, modified, and weaponized. Acting on Tony Stark's orders, they immediately begin dismantling the facility, systematically destroying weapons, armor components, vehicles, power systems, and experimental technology before any of it can be used against them. The armory staff quickly realize what is happening and initiate emergency self-defense protocols. Their final contingency is to remotely detonate the armored suits and weapons stored throughout the complex, denying the rebels access to the technology. However, Tony's resistance anticipated the possibility. During the uprising, Hammer sabotage and the team's earlier attacks have disabled much of the compound's security infrastructure, preventing many of the safeguards from activating. One by one, the armory's systems fail, leaving the staff powerless to stop the destruction. With the armory effectively neutralized, Ghost, Blizzard, and the Beetle leave the burning complex behind and race toward the Titanomech hangars, knowing the final battle has already begun. Elsewhere inside Mandarin City, Iron Man confronts the three completed Titanomechs. Wearing his Silver Centurion armor, Tony quickly discovers that his improvised suit is not yet capable of matching the overwhelming power of three giant machines operating in perfect coordination. Outnumbered and steadily losing ground, he realizes he cannot defeat them alone and urgently calls for assistance. At the opposite end of the city, Justin Hammer arrives at the massive drill Tony had previously questioned the Mandarin about. The enormous machine is protected by multiple layers of security, confirming Tony's suspicion that it plays an essential role in the Mandarin's larger plan. Hammer prepares to begin dismantling the drill and signals for the others to back up Iron Man, noting that the location is heavily protected and that the machine must be important. Before Hammer can proceed, Yin appears. Having discovered Hammer's betrayal, the Mandarin confronts his former engineer directly, denouncing him as a traitor before launching an attack. The confrontation is abruptly interrupted when Iron Man, driven backward by the relentless assault of the three Titanomechs, crashes directly into the battlefield between Hammer and the Mandarin. Far from the battle in China, Pepper Potts and James Rhodes arrive inside Tony Stark's workshop beneath his mansion. With communication to Tony impossible, they search for another way to bring him home. They turn to Jarvis, hoping the artificial intelligence has a contingency that Tony never revealed. After accessing Tony's hidden protocols, Jarvis informs them that the Iron Legion has finally been completed. Every suit Tony had spent months designing before his disappearance is operational and awaiting deployment. Realizing this is the opportunity they have been searching for, Pepper and Rhodey immediately organize a rogue rescue operation. Without waiting for government approval, they prepare to deploy the Iron Legion to Mandarin City and bring Tony home. Meanwhile, back in Mandarin City, the battle continues around the massive planetary drill. Iron Man, Titanium Man, and the Mandarin remain locked in combat as the machine reaches full power. Tony refuses to back down, meeting Yin's threats with unwavering defiance and promising that the Mandarin's plan will fail and that he will be the one to stop it. Yin responds by unleashing one of the 10 rings against Tony before immediately turning his attention toward Justin Hammer, determined to eliminate his former ally. As the battle spreads around the drill, Tony finally discovers its true purpose. The machine was never built simply to excavate. Yin intends to bore directly into the Earth's crust, reaching the planet's molten core. The unimaginable geothermal energy released by the operation will be fed directly into the ring-powered Titanomechs, transforming them into unstoppable vessels capable of carrying the souls trapped within the 10 rings. The drill begins tearing deeper into the planet. The ground around Mandarin City fractures as rivers of molten rock force their way toward the surface. Buildings collapse across the city while enormous cracks race across the landscape. The Titanomechs continue advancing through the destruction as Iron Man and Titanium Man desperately attempt to stop both the machines and the Mandarin. Throughout the chaos, Yin speaks almost reverently of the 10 rings, insisting they came from the stars and that they have guided him his entire life. He declares that once the Earth is destroyed, the energy of its molten core will allow him and the ancient beings within the rings to return to the stars where they belong, leaving humanity to perish with the dying planet. Before Yin can continue his assault, an SUV suddenly tears across the battlefield. Inside are Donald, Jenkins, and Leanne. Without hesitation, they drive directly into the Mandarin, slamming into him and abruptly interrupting his attack. At Resilient headquarters in Seattle, Tim and Macken work frantically to prepare a remote update for Tony Stark using the newly deployed Swarm network. Carson oversees the operation as the team attempts something that has never been done before. Tim reports that they have the system, though it is moving more slowly than Carson would like, and explains that they are effectively compiling a remote firmware update for Tony without any guide for how to do it. Macken monitors the Swarm's global communications grid as satellite relays continue coming online, noting that relays 19 through 30 are active and that, as long as the NavSat holds, Central Swarm Control has effectively been relocated to Carson and Pepper's apartment. He adds that if Tim can avoid accidentally damaging Tony's mind, they may actually succeed. Back in Mandarin City, the battle continues to escalate. Iron Man struggles to keep the 3 Titanomechs occupied while the unstable terrain beneath the drill continues collapsing around the battlefield. Tony calls for Hammer to shut the drill down, but Hammer keeps fighting his way toward the machine, insisting that he is not wasting time and that the situation is difficult for everyone. At that moment, the skies above Mandarin City fill with dozens of armored figures. War Machine arrives at the head of the Iron Legion, and the automated suits immediately engage the Titanomechs, surrounding the giant machines and relieving some of the pressure on Iron Man. Tony is visibly relieved to see Rhodey and the Legion arrive. Over the communications link, Tony quickly warns Rhodey that Hammer, Leanne, Donald, and Jenkins are now fighting alongside him. Rhodey cannot understand why Tony has allied himself with 4 of the very criminals he spent months putting behind bars. Tony briefly explains that the Mandarin intended to kill them all regardless of their loyalty, leaving them with no choice but to fight together. Back at Resilient headquarters, Tim finishes preparing the update and tells Carson that they are ready. Carson hesitates, worried that they may be wrong and cause serious damage. Tim explains the plan one final time. They used the Swarm to conduct a global micro-search for Tony and found him, then piggyback code into the Swarm's onboard operating system so they could remotely install an update to Tony's wetware system. The code impurities would be removed. Tony would regain control of himself. and the swarm would then come under his command. He would escape Mandarin's hideout, resume his Iron Man role, and the team would celebrate with mojitos. The remote update completes successfully. Within moments, Tony Stark's system finishes rebooting, and he immediately re-establishes contact with Resilient headquarters through the Swarm network. For the first time since his capture, Tony has full control over the technology he created. Carson Wyche is the first to respond, welcoming Tony back and noting that the Swarm has been launched without him. He also reports that there are 4.6 trillion particulate swarm elements in Tony's general area, all repulsor-powered and all capable of being weaponized if needed. Tony immediately recognizes the potential, realizing he is surrounded by an enormous number of tiny explosive devices. Taking command of the swarm, Tony transforms billions upon billions of microscopic repulsor-powered nanobots into an overwhelming offensive weapon. The invisible cloud engulfs the battlefield, detonating in carefully coordinated waves that tear through the 3 Titanomechs. Their armor is stripped apart piece by piece as countless microscopic explosions cascade across their enormous frames. Within moments, the giant machines collapse, their power systems failing under the relentless bombardment. With the Titanomechs destroyed, Iron Man descends onto the battlefield in spectacular fashion and turns his full attention to the Mandarin. The final duel begins. Yin unleashes the full power of the 10 rings, driving Iron Man back with overwhelming force. The battlefield around them continues to collapse as the damaged drill destabilizes the surrounding ground. Tony fights desperately, but the Mandarin gradually gains the upper hand, battering the unfinished Silver Centurion armor and pushing it close to failure. Just as Yin prepares to deliver a decisive blow, Titanium Man arrives. Without hesitation, Justin Hammer intervenes and kills the Mandarin. The battle ends instantly. Tony stares in disbelief, horrified by what has just happened. He tries to object, but Hammer refuses to apologize and defends his actions without hesitation. Tony insists that there are rules and laws, but Hammer rejects the idea, arguing that such rules stop mattering in a crisis and that improvisation is what wins. He points out that Tony has just destroyed a possible alien intelligence and challenges the idea that Tony is the hero while he is the villain. Tony has no immediate answer. He can only admit that he no longer knows. Leaving the battlefield behind, Tony opens a communications channel to Resilient and announces that they are coming home. Following the battle in Mandarin City, Tony Stark returns to the United States hailed as the man who has stopped a global catastrophe. With the Silver Centurion armor damage beyond immediate use, he retrieves one of his older Iron Man suits from the Stark Tower archive and tries to resume his familiar role as a superhero, answering emergencies as though life can simply continue from where it left off. It does not take long before S.H.I.E.L.D. requests his presence. Tony arrives aboard the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, where Maria Hill conducts a formal debriefing about everything that has transpired during his months in captivity. Although the atmosphere remains professional, the questioning quickly becomes more pointed as Maria tries to determine exactly how deeply the Mandarin has infiltrated Tony's life. Tony admits that he is compromised in every part of his identity, from his personal life to his work and his role as Iron Man, though he insists that he is fine now. Maria presses him for specifics, asking how he has been compromised and why he has brought his lawyer, especially since he is not under arrest and has done good work that night. Tony responds that the Mandarin has been everywhere and has at least some degree of access to his world, including the company, the Iron Man identity, and his own life. He explains that he has brought his lawyer for the same reason Maria has brought armed agents, suggesting that they both understand the situation is already politically messy and that he has made S.H.I.E.L.D. look bad on the international stage. Maria makes it clear that she does not see the situation as merely a public relations problem and asks whether Tony has any idea how Yin has managed to compromise him. Tony answers cautiously that he knows some of it. When Maria demands more, he explains that his backups have been compromised, his retrieval procedure has been compromised, and even S.H.I.E.L.D. has been compromised. The admission hangs heavily in the room. Maria then explains that S.H.I.E.L.D. is trying to make sense of months of missing information and conflicting intelligence. She notes that they are not even concerned about the fact that Tony's head of security has allowed Justin Hammer access to his cell phone. What matters is that Tony has been in Mandarin City for months with no contact from the outside world, and now he has returned as a hero to China with more questions than answers. The central concern is whether he is still compromised. Tony has no immediate response. Maria follows by asking how anyone could possibly know for certain whether he is still compromised. After a long silence, Tony asks whether he is under arrest. Maria answers that he is not, but leaves the statement unfinished. Tony then decides the conversation is over and says that if she changes her mind, she knows where to find him. After leaving the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, Tony Stark travels to Resilient headquarters. Although he has returned home a hero, there are still countless loose ends to resolve following the fall of the Mandarin. One of the first people he seeks out is Bethany Cabe. Finding her inside the Resilient offices, Tony immediately confronts her about whether she gave Justin Hammer his phone. Bethany is taken aback by the accusation, especially given everything Tony has just endured, and pushes back against his attempt to shift blame. Tony refuses to let the subject change and continues pressing her for an answer, insisting that Maria had told him Bethany gave Hammer access to a phone and that Hammer had helped shut Mandarin down. When Tony asks when it happened, Bethany finally explains that it was on the plane during the flight home. Tony quickly pieces everything together. During the flight back from China, Bethany had carelessly allowed Justin Hammer to borrow her phone. Rather than making an innocent call, Hammer had used it to contact Rumiko's assistant, Saya Ishii. Realizing the danger immediately, Tony acts without hesitation. He asks to be patched through to Rumiko so he can warn her, assuming Hammer is going to kill her. A secure line is opened to Rumiko. Tony urgently warns her that she is in danger and advises her to leave immediately, explaining that Hammer's coming for her. Rumiko dismisses the warning outright, refusing to take advice from Tony after everything that has happened between them. Convinced she remains untouchable, she ends a call. Later, Rumiko leaves the Pentagon and makes her way toward her car in the parking lot. Waiting for her are Justin Hammer and Leanne Foreman. As Rumiko approaches, the two carry out their plan. A devastating blast of energy engulfs the vehicle, killing Rumiko instantly and bringing an abrupt end to the head of Fujinet before anyone at the Pentagon has time to respond. The following evening, Tony Stark summons the senior staff of Stark Resilient to the rooftop of Stark Tower. The entire leadership team gathers, uncertain why Tony has requested the meeting. Tony descends onto the rooftop wearing his original Iron Man suit. Waiting beside the group is a collection of flowers he has arranged for each of them. He greets the team, explains that he has brought them flowers, and apologizes for having been distant lately. He tells them that he is going on a little vacation. After returning from Mandarin's control, he found that everything felt unchanged, with the same old problems still everywhere. Nothing has shifted, and he needs time to get his head together and come up with new ideas. The announcement leaves everyone silent for a moment as they process what Tony has just told them. One by one, Tony says his goodbyes, embracing each member of the team before stopping beside Rhodey. Rhodey still cannot believe what he is hearing and suggests that Tony should at least go somewhere like Maui. Tony responds that Earth is for other people and that he needs the shock of the new. He says he cannot sit around waiting for the future to happen to him, and that he's going to go hunt the future and come back energized. He assures them that they will do great. Carson, trying to understand how serious Tony is, asks the most practical question that comes to mind. Tony reassures him that the suit recycles everything he needs and is perfectly capable of sustaining him for a few weeks. He thanks Carson for the work they have done together. Carson nods and returns the sentiment. Finally, Tony turns toward Pepper. After everything they have been through together, she struggles to imagine him leaving again. Tony tells her that he will miss her most of all. Pepper begins to ask the question on everyone's mind. Tony gently interrupts and tells her that it will be long enough. Then they kiss. He tells everyone not to worry about him anymore. He hopes they like the flowers and admits that he did not know how else to say he was sorry. He compares the gesture to a breakup, saying that he is apologizing and sending flowers. He says he is sorry for everything and promises that he will do better next time. With nothing more left to say, Tony powers up his armor. The gathered team watches as Iron Man lifts away from Stark Tower, climbing higher above Manhattan before disappearing beyond clouds. At Avengers Mansion, life has continued, and inside one of the mansion's sprawling underground laboratories, Hank Pym is putting the finishing touches on his latest invention. A secure transport elevator opens. Tony Stark has returned. After months away, he enters the laboratory carrying himself with renewed purpose. His travels have given him perspective, but not peace. Hank Pym welcomes him back with little ceremony, immediately directing Tony's attention toward the centerpiece of the lab. Suspended within a cylindrical containment chamber is Hank's newest project, Ultron. The machine is incomplete. Its synthetic body remains unfinished, while countless streams of code continue running across surrounding displays. The project represents years of Hank's research into artificial intelligence, autonomous defense systems, and adaptive machine learning. Tony studies the design with immediate interest. Hank explains that he needs Tony's expertise to complete it. Both Tony Stark and Hank Pym were granted a horrifying vision of a future in which the Avengers fell. A future where Earth had no defenders left. A future neither of them is willing to allow. Determined to prevent that future from ever becoming reality, the two greatest engineers on the Avengers put aside their disagreements and combine their knowledge. Together, they begin building the Ultron program,